You just keep feeding them.
They move away and they find more food inside.
We gotta add more buckets. I found a potential
Too many
buyer
wires.
for the.
All right, guys, you ready to kick things off here? It's 5 o'clock local time here in Bali. Happy New Year, y'all. 2018. Holy smokes. All right, we got a great thing lined up for you tonight. It's the filter number 130 for January 2nd, 2018. We do this every week. We've been doing this every week since about the spring of 2014. But what is it that we're doing? Well, we are, hold on, let me turn this music off here. Sorry, folks. But what are we doing? What is the filter? Well, it started off as a way to exchange information, right? We had this new thing called Bitcoin, but we didn't know what it was, how it was going to work, and we decided to get together every week and try and figure it out together. Things have become so complicated since then. We need it more than ever. It's very important to exchange information, and there are really no experts in this field, right? Everybody is a noob, even people who have been around for years, because this is new for humanity. We don't know what's going to happen. So I thought for today it would be fun to get back to basics and figure out why are we paying attention to these things, and what is the whole thing all about. So that's going to include a little bit of a kind of a philosophical discussion, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty about the latest stuff around fighting the religious wars, and try and make sense of this the scaling debate and the basically trying to make things work in this for this new thing, this new kind of money that we have. All right, so let's kick things off. I'll share my screen here. Everybody should be seeing what we're seeing at home there. All right. Let's kick things off. Here we go. All right, Happy New Year, guys. 2018. I saw one that had the 8 was a Bitcoin, but I thought that was a little bit much. Could 2018 possibly be as exciting as 2017?
Yes.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
All right, we'll see. We'll see. 2017 is going to be hard to top. Along with the new year, what else is it? It's Bitcoin's birthday. Tomorrow, January 3rd, in 2009, we got the Genesis block, right? Here it is, folks. This is the blockchain, so we can actually go back and see it. This is blockchain.info, looking at the very first block of Bitcoin. No inputs. This is the brand new. Of course, the reward back then was 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. Look at that. The amazing thing about this, though, is that, well, first of all, Bitcoin is like the most amazing software thing to come along in a while. I've never known an engineer to not want credit for his work, but Satoshi Nakamoto is still a mystery. Also, that money has not moved. That's the first block. It's currently worth $600,000. What kind of incredible restraint somebody is showing by, first of all, not taking credit for the work and then also not spending the Bitcoin. Crazy, huh? Anyway, tomorrow it will be 9 years since the Genesis block. Actually, we can see the actual transaction here at 6:15 Greenwich Mean Time tomorrow. A lot of people think Satoshi might be from the UK because of the timing on this. Maybe he was working all day, like he was a little bit hungover on the 2nd, and then on the 3rd, maybe he was working all day to make sure it was ready, and then at 6:15 they went ahead and launched it. Here's a little thing on Bitcoin, the Bitcoin wiki about that Genesis block. Did you guys know that in every Bitcoin transaction you can put some text? Did you guys know that? Mm-hmm. You can put a little bit of text. Satoshi put a little bit of text in that first block. Let me see if I can find it here. What did he write? Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. The Times, 3 January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. Why did he write this? Why did he write this sentence?
It was Germany and Greece at the time.
No,
I don't know.
exactly why you want to
Yeah,
have
who-
Bitcoin.
I don't know. Was that Germany?
Transfer to the exchequer.
Well, first of all, the Bitcoin blockchain is a version of reality, and how do you prove something's real? A lot of people will hold up a newspaper next to their face, but really, this is the kind of the next best thing to prove that this happened on or after January 3rd, 2009, because presumably he didn't know what the headline would be on the Times in advance. So this proves that this happened at this point in time. But why would he choose this headline?
Well, it's exactly why you want to have Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's a little window.
Classic centralized system, just print out the money.
It's a little window into the philosophical mind of Satoshi to say, hey, we want to, maybe we don't want this to happen, right? Maybe we don't want bailouts for banks. Now, does anybody know why banks get bailed out? Why does this happen? And what might Bitcoin do to fix banks being bailed out? Why do banks need bailouts anyway? Don't they have all the money? Can't they print money? Can't they make money out of thin air? Why do banks need to be bailed out?
Money print bank or the central bank prints money?
The central bank makes the base money supply, but then when banks make a loan, they also create money. Not out of thin air. They need a signature. That comes from you guys. Your labor for the next 30 years, if it's a home loan in the United States, is what you get in exchange. So a lot of people like to say banks just make money out of thin air, but really you need a counterparty for them to make money. It requires your signature, your promise to pay. They can't just print up some money and then buy a Ferrari. Okay, so why do banks need to be bailed out if that's the case?
They extended their credit so far that they couldn't.
Right. So they created so many loans, but those loans didn't perform. Why can't they just keep on going? Why can't they print money to pay off the loans that they've got?
Well, that's essentially what they did.
Right.
Banks,
Yeah. Well, okay. And well, you guys understand the nature of fractional reserve lending. Banks have a reserve, like say, call it 10%, and then they can loan out 10 times what they have in reserve, like a 10-to-1 reserve ratio. And if those 90% of that money they've created, if the people can't repay those loans, that's when they need the bailout. So it's pretty amazing to me that they would extend themselves so far that they would need a bailout, even though they've got a ratio of 10-to-1, and sometimes it's even more than that. But that's the case, and Bitcoin, apparently, according to Satoshi Nakamoto, presumably he put this in there because he thought Bitcoin could solve this problem. How does Bitcoin solve this problem?
Well, they go gambling with our money, right?
Because
They basically go to the casino and they're like, "Here, we're gonna spin this wheel. And if it's heads, we win, we keep it. If it's tails, we lost your money, and the government's not gonna let you lose your money, so they're gonna pay us back and bail you out." So then they take more and more risks. Over this is the second bailout, so it just becomes systematized. It's because of their ability to print money. And what Satoshi Nakamoto was saying, we don't want to be part of that racket anymore, because over time it amounts to the greatest theft in history. And the bailout that happened in 2008 in the United States, the rough cost of that, if you look at what it cost savers in terms of money printing, you're looking at trillions of dollars. Literally $3 to $5 trillion was stolen through hidden inflation, and nobody knows it because people can't do that kind of math. It's too hard, it's too complicated, it's too hidden. But there's a group of cypherpunks who've been working since the 1960s, 1970s on these problems. They're very libertarian mindset. They believe that this is theft, which I agree with. I think it is. So this is the mechanism past that by having a fixed money supply, no lending against that, and having it outside of the hands of the banks and the government.
I mean, printing money essentially encouraging inflation. That happened, but not in the U.S. and Europe. It happened in countries like Indonesia and China. Liquidity ran globally. So
it happened in the U.S.
You had a lot of malinvestment.
It happened in certain things. It happened in asset prices, like the stock market, and
Commodities,
oil. was a big one. It reinflated the real estate bubble. So it got hidden into those things. It didn't show up in the CPI, which is basic goods and services, because China, India, and the technology industry all were getting massive deflation. And normally consumers would benefit from that deflation if we fall in prices of goods and services, except we didn't get that benefit. Instead, it got put into their pockets. Another thing, the place where it got hit was savers. Like if you're a retired pensioner or saver, you're expecting a 5% return on your savings to pay for your retirement, but now that's gone to zero. So the pensioners have been pickpocketed to go on banks. And this is not new, this happens every year.
Yeah. Also, Bitcoin is a bearer instrument. Does anyone know what a bearer instrument is? It means that the bearer actually has that item, right? And when you have your money in a bank, you're not actually in possession of the money. You can log into your bank account and you can see a number on the screen, but you don't actually have that until you take out the physical representation of that money, right? And banks, when they need to be bailed out, it's because they've given away they've symbolized too much of the money, and then when people want the real thing, it just doesn't exist.
There's not enough to go up.
Right. And luckily we have governments that still have that ability to print money or to make money out of thin air. But if we all held our own money, if we all had bearer instruments, then you wouldn't have the ability to do fractional reserve lending. I mean, you can say what you will about fractional reserve lending and the merits of it or not, but if we were all holding on to our own Bitcoin keys, then they couldn't lend based on a reserve ratio because they wouldn't actually have the money to give. So it remains to be seen if they will end up doing fractional reserve lending with Bitcoin. But this is another thing that makes it more difficult to recreate the present system. The nature of Bitcoin is, well, presumably you can hold on to it yourself. You can have it, the actual thing. It's the first digital real thing. If I have it, you don't have it. If I copy a CD, we can both have it. But if I have a Bitcoin and I give it to you, I no longer have that thing. The implications are profound.
So are you saying, Gary, that if every one of us or half of us who own Bitcoin went to cash them in, there wouldn't be enough cash to go around?
If you did that with your bank, that's called a bank run.
Yeah, there's not enough.
Bitcoin.
With Bitcoin, if you have your keys, then you don't have to go wait in line at the bank. You've got them.
You hold your money. You possess your money.
But one bottleneck is potentially the exchanges where we want to convert to fiat and then withdraw, right?
Right.
The limitations that are set there, that gatekeeper.
If you've got it.
Yeah, right now we're still converting to fiat.
That would be the ideal. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I do find quite ironic, though. The technology that's been designed to disrupt banks. Those who hold their account of Bitcoin, put it onto a hardware wallet, software wallet, where do they store that? Safety. In safety deposit. In safety deposit.
But unlike the current system, that's not the only option. You can memorize your private key, friends. There are software wallets that are coming that will allow you to just take on your mobile phone and split it across your friends and family. It's almost like your Facebook program. And then if you need your Bitcoin back, basically any 3 out of the 5 have to do a big transaction. Maybe 1 out of the 5 is a small transaction.
Multi-sig wallets and that type of thing.
Yeah,
right?
you can
Don't get me wrong, but
store.
if you look at the grandma effect, if you ask your grandmother to actually hold onto a Bitcoin or give her a private key in a public key, there's no way.
But eventually, what will happen is, this will be in place by the end of this year, is you will actually just send your grandmother coins in an app. You should have an app. So your grandma's got an app in his app. So this is for the kids, right? Yeah. And so it'll be an app, and she'll be able to recover it by sending you a message saying, hey, I want to spend this much. And you'll prove it. You can say yes or no for large amounts. For small amounts, obviously, it's a neutral bearer instrument. She just has it.
But would your grandmother prefer to have third-party trusts hold those keys?
For sure. But today, the only third party you can use is banks. Tomorrow, with Bitcoin, you can use
Coinbase. Coinbase custodians.
Sure, but you can use any third party. That's the point. It's not just Coinbase. You can use any versions yourself. You can use any third party. That's a huge difference. Who's the gatekeeper? So it gets rid of the gatekeeper. It's not to say that nobody else is needed, right? No one's an island. We all need users to survive. But you can choose which members of the community provided security instead of just a small amount itself at the bank.
Yeah, there's a fundamental trade-off between security and usability. And someday we want our grandmothers to be able to use Bitcoin just as easily as we do. I think it's someday we'll get there, but yeah.
Sam got his grandma onto Steemit. Do you know Steemit, Sam? She has a profile called Crypto Grandma. If you guys want to check it out.
Oh, well. I'll take you back.
Okay, so it's always fun to take a look at the current system and also just get a feel for what Satoshi Nakamoto might have been trying to fix. This is from the Federal Reserve. It's the economic research from the St. Louis Fed, I think. But this graph that you're looking at is the monetary base, or the amount of base money supply that the U.S. government creates. And you can see it's not technically M1. It's technically adjusted monetary base. If you look at an M1 graph, it looks a little bit different. But essentially, this is the money that other money is created from. And this is a policy choice that the U.S. Federal Reserve has at their disposal to deal with problems. And I don't know if you guys can spot the anomaly on this graph. Things are a little bit different after what happened like around this time.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
amazing is people say Bitcoin's complicated. There's not one person in 10,000 that explain how the Federal Open Market Committee works, how open bond operations work, how banks that extend the money supply, what the difference between M1 and M2 and M3 base, right? This system is a house of cards that was built over 100 years that, puzzle, how they things on top of each other.
Yeah, like a Rube Goldberg kind
Exactly.
of,
and
yeah.
we just accept it because that's kind of the way it is. But this is our productivity, this is our wealth, this is our creativity, this is our time that they're storing up and they're manipulating. A few clever people can do a lot with it. So yes, Bitcoin may seem complicated, but I assure you, like I did 4 years in economics and studied micro and macroeconomics. I still can't explain to you guys first, but I can explain to you how Bitcoin.
I've watched some cartoons on YouTube, but I still don't understand.
Ray Dalio, who runs Bridgewater, has a very famous that explains how the money supply works. And it's about the credit cycle expansion and inflation and debt and all that. And it will give you a complete headache. And what you'll realize is not only does it take him an hour to try to explain it using cartoons and that, but then there are other people who will absolutely contradict. They'll say, no, that is not how the money supply works in the economy. It actually works this way. The reality is nobody actually knows how it works. It's kind of this emergent thing that just sort of holds together, and so we just trust it. But there was a time when we thought when we went up the gold standard, the whole thing would collapse. There was a time when it went from 1-to-1 gold to fractional gold that we thought it would all collapse. And now we think it might all collapse because of this. The reality is nobody actually knows how this works.
Yes, yes. Well, and there's a figure here. I mean, they've got, this is thousands of billions, right? So trillions of dollars that they've created. And of course, money is made from this base money supply. But the interesting thing to me is we don't know how many US dollars exist. Like, we don't know the actual number. I mean, there's a number here, but it's some multiple of this number. And money is a symbol, and it's a measurement mechanism. It's an accounting system for the world, how we measure our output, our productivity, our value to one another. And yet we don't know how long our ruler is, because we don't know how many US dollars exist. And this is why we can have a housing bubble or a housing problem, because we don't know how much houses are worth, right? One day your house is worth $1 million, the next day it's worth 500,000. How could we get it that wrong? How could we be that off, right? And where does that money go? Well, it doesn't go anywhere. All of the value is still there. We're just having a problem measuring it all, because we don't know how long our measuring stick is. We don't know how many US dollars exist. Now, how does this manifest itself in the real world? And I think we're sitting in Indonesia. Does anybody know what this is that I've got on the screen here?
1 rupiah.
Right. This is not 100,000 rupiah. This is 1 rupiah. Presumably somebody earned this 1 rupiah by picking some rice, or giving somebody a ride, or selling a piece of art. And today this 1 rupiah is not worth anything. It's like a fraction of a US cent. And it's a real pity because 1964 wasn't that long ago. You know, what if somebody put this in a box for their grandchild and they wanted, you know, to give them something or leave something behind? The value represented in this symbol has totally evaporated and no longer exists. And this is because not only do we not know how much money exists, but it's also continually inflated and disappears before our eyes. In one generation or two generations, the value can completely evaporate, like the value of this note. Of course, this also happens in the United States. This is 5 U.S. quarters. How much is this worth, guys? 5 U.S. quarters from
1964. Well, silver.
This happens to be the last year that there was silver in the U.S. quarter. So this is not $1.25. This is more like $15. And this is an interesting figure because guess what the minimum wage was back in 1964? $1.25. $1.25 for the minimum wage back in 1964. What's the minimum wage today?
Roughly around
16
10 to
bucks,
15.
No.
Depends.
Did they pass something new?
No, but it depends on the
Depends on the
state.
state.
Yeah,
Between 10 and 15.
875 federal, and maybe in some states it's
Oh yeah, that was in my alley.
Okay. So what I wanted to illustrate with this is, for one thing, look at how much the money loses value, but who pays for it? Because somebody was giving their minimum wage labor for $1.25 back in 1964, and because we've changed the measurement mechanism, somebody's earning $7 today. But if we just would have had sound money, presumably they could be making $15 an hour. And people fight and picket and try and make it to be $15 an hour. But if we just had sound money, maybe we wouldn't have to have all of the hoopla. And maybe it's interesting that the poorest amongst us pay for that inflation between 1964 and today. Paying them $15 an hour from then until now, imagine how much money that is.
It's like they here in Indonesia before the Asian financial crisis. If you look what the wages were in Indonesia, change that to dollars and compare now, they actually earn less now than that.
Right.
Well, this is at the heart of the monetary system. So these are Keynesian economics. John Maynard Keynes came up with the system, basically insisted that inflation was necessary. And his reasoning was that because there are times when the economy contracts, and so the logical thing is for prices to go down. But people don't like their wages to go down. So the only way to make wages go down is to inflate them away. And so that was actually the entire reason behind the current monetary system, to allow inflation to eat away wages. But obviously it's not. To your point, like if we had stuck with $1.25 minimum wage and we had not had any inflation, then the purchasing power that people would have would be equivalent to twice the minimum wage that it is today. So, but the system is designed to get rid of wages, to cut wages. That's literally that is the reasoning, and it's not even a secret. You can go read up on this, and the reason is because the idea is that people don't like falling prices and they don't like falling goods. And this may have been true 100 years ago when it was really hard to like change all the chalkboards, all the prices, and all the printed stuff. But now we run a computerized economy, at least in those first world countries. So it's actually fairly quick and easy for prices to adapt. So this is a big question for cryptocurrencies. Will a deflationary or a flat currency allow a modern economy to function in a downturn? Nobody knows.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that it's the poorest amongst us that are the most affected because they don't have a stock portfolio, they don't have a home, they can act as a hedge. Right. So this is how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
And now wages are taxed more than investments.
Yep.
Go figure.
Right. I thought I had one more thing up there. Anyway,
Apples and oranges.
yeah. One of the things that money does is it allows us to cooperate as a society by maintaining a certain ratio of the symbol, which is the money in the middle, to the real world items, which is the apples and the oranges in the world. And if we have a bumper crop of apples, then the ratio of dollars to apples changes. It becomes less expensive for an apple, and it communicates this to society through the invisible hand, right? It lets us know that It lets the farmer know, hey, maybe I'll plant more oranges next year than apples, because there was a bumper crop of apples, and apples are worth less. And this whole measurement mechanism that money provides for society depends on this ratio. But if we change the ratio, then this is a dynamic count, this is a dynamic count, and this is a dynamic count, and there ceases to be a ratio between the symbol money and all of the things that it's trying to symbolize, which are the real things in the world. So it really hamstrings society's ability to cooperate and communicate its basic needs around anything in society. So we really do ourselves a disservice by robbing ourselves of the ability to count and to trade information in this way. That makes sense? There's one more graph that I wanted to show you. This blue line is the monetary supply, like from the last graph, but does anyone know what this red line is?
The Fed rate.
Yeah, the federal funds rate. This is the interest rate, or the price of money when you lend it, right?
It's practically zero for how many years?
It went to zero shortly after 2008, at the same time that we were printing all this money. So not only have we quadrupled the money supply, but the cost of money has been artificially kept at zero. How are interest rates calculated? Does anyone know where interest rates come from? How do we decide how much to charge somebody when we want to loan them money?
Well, the Fed sets the base rate, and then from that, depending on the type of loan,
Right.
risk, I don't know, but when it's practically zero.
What would happen if you didn't have the Fed setting rates? How would we decide?
It would be the open market, so it would be depending on.
Right. People,
Supply and
interest is I remember when I was a little kid, I had no idea what interest was. And I thought it was very mysterious. And then people describe it, they say it's the cost of money. And I'm like, the cost of money? Like, that just like makes my head hurt. But there's a supply and demand for loaned money. And, if a lot of people are saving, then there's a big supply. And so the interest rate should come down. And if not many people are saving, then there's a shortage and the interest rate should go up. And this could be set by market mechanisms, but this is another communication mechanism that we've been robbed of this ability to communicate the needs and wants of society, because we've been artificially keeping the interest rate close to zero. It basically takes away our ability to understand the relative needs and wants around money itself. And it creates all kinds of distortions. I would hold that we really don't know what anything is worth in society, because we've quadrupled the money supply. We've held interest rates at zero for years and years and years, 10 years now. It's 2018, 2008.
We don't know what to do.
Right. Well, it's interesting. This new thing is trying to be born, this Bitcoin thing, by the way, right? It's still, it's trying to be born, but it's still in the works. And that's why there's so much fighting, right? Everybody's fighting over what Bitcoin is, what it will be, how it's going to scale. And there's a social aspect to this thing we're talking about, the social aspect of money, because we all have to agree on what symbol is going to represent the real world. And right now, the US dollar has really reigned since World War II, but lately we've been a bit of a bad steward of that responsibility. And the world is trying to come up with something different. The Chinas of the world, the Russias of the world, the Irans, the people that the U.S. doesn't really like or cooperate with much, are looking for alternatives to this system. They're creating their own payment mechanisms and their own development banks and their own way to settle their own balance of accounts. And then you've also got Bitcoin going on. So the world is experiencing a tremendous amount of change right now. And it seems to me to be normal that we would have lots of fighting in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin wants this mantle, or something like Bitcoin, it's going to be, the incumbent powers are not going to go quietly, and it's going to be very interesting to see what arises out of this thing. But it's definitely, we're going to see what happens in our lifetime. It's changing before our eyes, right?
I don't think the dollar reserve as a reserve currency might be gone within our lifetime, but people are assuming it's going to be replaced by another
like the
you know, line,
SDR.
but if most likely the way it looks like it's going to be completely decentralized, you're going to have not a world currency, you're going to have dozens and dozens of combination of fiat with crypto. I think.
You're gonna have frequent flyer miles and bar tabs and
Yeah, I mean,
tokens from Chuck E.
it
Cheese.
could vary. You might have a token specifically for saving for life insurance. You might have a token for
Yeah.
travel transact. Who knows? But it doesn't look like.
So do you think
that can't go on forever? It's zero. It's free money. They're literally printing free money, and the financial system has been abusing that. That's why the stock market is just flying. I mean, what is it like now? 25,000. Insane.
Well, it also harms savers, right? Because the interest rate is at zero, and pension funds and sovereign wealth
Don't
funds,
save.
they're
There's nobody saving you.
they have a lot of money that's already saved, and they're trying to get a return so that they can pay the people who retire from the state of Illinois, for example. It has become very difficult, and they've got to enter more and more risky investments in order to get a return because of the artificially low rates. So we're in a weird world now. And
the U.S. is the largest debtor on Social Security, obligations, Medicare, Medicaid. It owes more money than any other planet. And so printing money is a great way to get out of that debt, because you basically say, hey, I owe you $1,000 a month after you retire for the rest of your life. Well, $1,000 I can repay, and it's not easy what $1 used to. Then there you go, we paid our debt. So neither side, Republicans or Democrats, has the nerve to know that won't get elected. But because people can't do inflation math, the simpler way to do it is just to look the other way while the Fed prints a lot of money and basically wipes out all those obligations. It's just like the same thing with minimum wage people, except these are wages that are owed in the future. So the easiest way to do that is to pay them in devalued currency. So one could argue that this is how the U.S. is balancing. In fact, the largest purchasers of the government debt are central banks. So the government, on one hand, is running up all this debt. On the other hand, the central banks are and retire that debt. So it's like one pocket to the other.
right, so they've got to get all those unfunded liabilities paid off before the rest of the world decides on a new reserve currency.
So the rest of the world is busy doing it. At least Western societies are busy doing it. Japan is busy doing it. The only people who really aren't doing it are the Chinese and the Indians. Yeah, eventually they're going to catch on.
So is Bitcoin too much truth for the world to handle? I mean, do we really want like a real accounting of every piece of work that everyone does, or do we want to inflate? Do we want to live in this world where we can kind of wave away our debts? Or I mean, this is the way it has worked, and it has a justification. Do you think the world would be a better place if everybody who dug a ditch got some value in exchange for that dug ditch, and the value kept that value for the rest of that person's lifetime? Would the world be a better place?
Yes, but
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
actually what's happening now. Like, to be honest, with Bitcoin, it's a lot of speculation, pumping it up, cashing out, going and buying, houses and
Lambos.
Yeah, Lamborghinis and stuff. Like, can we really be honest about what's actually happening here? Like, a lot of get-rich-quick schemes, a lot of forking, and you magically get new, cryptocurrency that you can trade in and then cash out and buy other things. But that's actually what's happening. So,
Well, right now the world is deciding, is this going to be the new money? And it's assigning it a very low probability. Right now the probability that Bitcoin is the next gold or the next money is like a single-digit percentage points based on its valuation. And there are all these other things that are competing to be the new money by saying they have better characteristics. It settles more quickly.
Excuse me,
Could you
talk a
speak
little
up?
louder? I
Sorry.
can't hear it all.
It's just people, the world is having a debate right now on what the next money is. And it's saying that something like a Bitcoin actually only has a very low percentage probability that it is the next money. And so investors and speculators are basically guessing what the next money is going to be. And different coins compete on different characteristics. So Bitcoin says we're the most decentralized, the most secure. Zcash says we're the most anonymous. Monero says, no, we have a different algorithm for anonymity. Ethereum says we're the most programmable, and the future of computers will programmable money. So the different things that could be money are competing. And right now it's unlikely that any of them will work. So they are highly speculative investments. If and when one of them works, then that one will end up being very valuable. It will end up being stable. And then the average person can start thinking about using it as money. Until then, it is a highly speculative investment. It is like a technology investment. It's like a seed stage technology company in Silicon Valley where you have a bunch of venture investors investing very cheaply, and the odds are that it's going to go to zero. And there's a lot of bad companies, there's a lot of scams, there's a lot of junk in there. And if you want to play that game, if you want to play the investing game, it's kind of a bit of a casino, but it's a casino with potentially great outcome for humanity. Then you can invest a little bit into it, and if you're right, you'll be rewarded, and if you're wrong, you won't. If you look at the 1600s, the Italian nation states created the fractional reserve banking system that we know today. And the people who invested in the first banks and who figured out that, yeah, we're going to switch from florins and gold and ducats to this new kind of lending with numbers and IOUs and notes, those people were considered speculators. They were considered, get rich quick pumpers. They took a lot of random chances. A lot of banks went bust. A lot of people issued notes that never got paid off. A lot of people ran off with money. But those are the same people who became the Rothschilds and the Wallenbergs and the actual trillionaires. There are actual trillionaire families out there, and they all come from that era. It was the greatest transfer of wealth in history up until that point. So the transition into a new form of money is extremely rare. Like it was like from shells to gold, back like 5,000 years ago, and then from gold and silver to probably like notes and IOUs, which was in Italy a few hundred years ago. And from that, we went to nation-state fiat currencies. And then from fiat currencies, we went from gold-backed fiat to non-gold-backed fiat. And now we might be going to math-based currencies, which is what cryptocurrencies are. These transitions happen across lifetimes. Like you can't attach a pattern to it because the last set of people who saw this are all dead. And the last set of people who saw it before that are all dead. So trying to attach a pattern to it is really hard because as humans, we only put in patterns for things that happened 10 or 20 or 30 years ago at most. So it's a low probability, high outcome event. And so today, it looks like it's scammy and speculative and Ponzi scheme because we're trying to bootstrap a new form of money. And it may not work. And if it doesn't work, everything you go in there's a trail of tears, we all look stupid, it goes to zero. But if it works,
I think the reality is, though, the reality we have to understand is the technology is so young.
Absolutely.
And that's the reality. I mean, at DevCon, which is the Ethereum development conference, they recently said that the technology has gone from being an infant to a toddler. So, I mean, in terms of line of sight of revenues for a lot of these technologies, they're 18 months, 3 to 5 years in reality. So what you've actually got is phenomenal potential, which is being seen. And because of the open source structure of all this technology, you've got everybody working together as a community to layer on top of open source technology. So it's expanding at a rapid rate, and we will see some real winners come out of this relatively soon.
I think you're right that the technology probably improved 50% or 2x last year, but the prices went up 20x. So there was definitely a huge disconnect. But markets are forward-looking. Right? Investors who invest in markets, they see small changes which signal good things in the future, and they'll pile in, and they'll basically pull a lot of that revenue forward into the present by investing. So it's really hard to say. Nobody knows if we're in a bubble or not.
I think we're in a massive bubble. I think, but I think like bubbles, they deflate, and then they come back to their natural level, and then they're reinflating. I think we've got so much talent that's being developed on an open source structure. This is going to game change everything.
I'm
not
torn.
just
I can point to you. I can give you 5 good reasons where we're absolutely in a bubble, and give you 5 good reasons where we're not. And I give it. Sure. Why are we in a bubble? Prices have gone 20x. The tech has gone 2x. There are total trash coins that are absolute scams. If you look at the code, that are trading at valuations of tens of billions of dollars, that are pumped and hyped, and the volume is too low, and someone's gaming it. And there's lockups in the back, insider trading, self-trading on zero liquidity exchanges. No one's actually using it, right? Anyone shopping with Bitcoin, anyone buying Bitcoin, anyone accepting Bitcoin. So those are all clear indicators that it is very bubbly. It's also purely a faith-based thing. If everyone believes in Bitcoin, it's real. If nobody believes in it, it goes the other way, it goes to zero. Those are all indicators of a bubble. The pumpers, the dumpers, John McAfee tweeting a point of the week every week on Twitter, that's all bubbly behavior. The reasons why it's not a bubble, well, it's this chart right here. I mean, if you look at the total gold supply, gold is essentially a consensus hallucination. Like, we all accept gold because everybody else accepts gold. We decided tomorrow it was silver or platinum, it would be silver or platinum.
But gold is nice and shiny.
Exactly. And people talk about the
Does it
jewelry
rise?
value of gold, but the
And
jewelry
useless.
value of gold is around $65 an ounce. The trading value of gold is $1,500 an ounce. There's also studies that show that half of the value of oil is actually a store of value. It's not actually for burning oil. It's for people trying to protect their money. Same with real estate. Many major cities, Shanghai or London or San Francisco or New York, a lot of them real estate prices are high because they're used as stores of value for people who are trying to get it out of their home country. So if you look at gold, $7 trillion market cap, all of crypto together is a $600 billion market. So it's still a small fraction of where it could be. Bitcoin becomes electronic gold, it's going to go up 50x from here minimum. The US dollar has an $80 trillion money supply, the maximum definition of that, and about half of that or more is store of value as well. So the actual store of value market alone can be measured in the $50 to $100 trillion range, which basically says that Bitcoin and all the crypto today is valued at 1% chance of being a store of value. And you can easily argue that 5-10 years from now, that our kids or the younger generation will want to hold some percentage of their store of value. Yeah, they're not going to put a barrel of oil in their house, right? But they might go buy an oil future. They might buy some gold bars. But most likely, being part of the digital generation, they'll say, hey, I want to store it as digital cryptocurrency.
But the only value that anything has is when somebody's prepared to pay for it.
Not necessarily. So in crypto, it's one level beyond because these are actually functioning internet protocols. And so they can do a lot more than just
So how do you value it?
Well, today they're not getting used as such. Ethereum is the most promising one in that regard. It's a programmable cryptocurrency. You can run financial derivatives on it. There are people who are trying to build blockchains to do Internet of Things, to do solar power grids, to do bandwidth trading. Those are much further out. Those are a decade out. But if and when those things win, those are going to be markets that are going to be worth more than Uber or Facebook or Twitter because they're these decentralized global marketplaces. So I could easily argue that this whole space is going to be worth tens of trillions of dollars. And so investing today,
absolutely agree. But
you know,
it comes back
be
to,
patient.
the fundamental question, I think, about the bubble idea. Something is only worth what someone's prepared to pay for it. Gold is only worth $1,300 an ounce because that's what the market says. Now, whether the market manipulates that is a different issue.
The reason I push back on that because that's not true for stocks. Like the stock in a company is not worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. Because the stock actually creates an earnings stream, and the earnings stream is always available to you. So Warren Buffett buys a company.
But if you look at .com, if you look at .com stocks, for example, and you compare those to traditional stocks, those were valued way out of stress.
Yeah, and
so that's only valued once somebody's prepared.
But at that time, you had Apple, you had Google, you had Amazon in that group, and if you had bought those three stocks, you didn't need to ever trade them again.
But you also had X.com, which
absolutely
a shed load of money. You had a load of other
the
.coms,
total market cap,
and done.
the total market cap of the entire .com bubble is $1.7 trillion. Today, Apple plus Google alone are worth. You had just invested in that bucket and held on to it, and agreed you would have had to ride the downturns 20 years later, you would still be at multiples of your original investment. So even in a bubble, you cannot afford to completely ignore it and sit out. There are people who exited Bitcoin.
I'm not saying, Apple and Google, it's Darwinian economics. Sorry, Darwinian economics in this whole space, and in the whole of the .com space, it's Darwinian economics. This is survive. And it's going to be the same.
Absolutely.
It's going to be the same in the crypto space.
Yeah, I think there are 5 legit cryptocurrencies. The rest are all junk.
Can you name them?
Not to be tweeted or repeated.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Interesting
What
thing
about
about
recorded?
This is live.
Yeah,
this is live.
what I find really interesting about the space is not just about currency. Like a lot of these kind of crypto tokens or whatever, you're investing in a technology and platform that might be 10 years down the track or whatever, or you might be investing in a company that's going to do X, Y, and Z that's 10 years down the track. So it's difficult to kind of like weigh them up because it's not just about trading, fiat into this currency. It's about what this company.
It's access to credit. It's now the easiest way to raise money in the world. How many billion this year was raised? It's like 40 billion.
It's going to get a lot harder. It's already getting harder.
Yeah, but
Because of
still
regulation.
compared to traditional, it's
The
still
same
the
ICOs
easiest way.
that were raising.
Do we really need a token for all of those business ideas, though?
No,
And it's interesting to compare and contrast like all of these business ideas with the mother of all business ideas, which is money itself, right? The money use case is the most valuable use case in the space. And I think it dwarfs all others. Like if you want to do supply chain or you want to put music rights on the blockchain. Those businesses are way smaller than money itself, and we haven't solved money itself either. So we're still, I mean, there's a lot of hype around blockchains.
But the tokens allow for a frictionless process. I mean, if I'm trying to raise money crowdfunding using Kickstarter or something like that, you have to go through the U.S. and you have all these restrictions and all these costs on top of it. If you're dealing with tokens, basically anybody can send you money.
Don't you think the government is going to start regulating on it?
Let them, yeah. They've been trying to do it. They've been trying to do that. They realize it's a double-edged sword. They can regulate it, they can't. I mean, ultimately they won't be able to regulate. It's like regulating the internet because it's the internet of money.
But they can regulate the exchanges.
They can regulate the exchanges.
China prohibits a lot on the internet, but guess what? You can see it. You can get anything.
You can't regulate a decentralized exchange.
You can't shut down.
You can. That's the problem. So if the decentralized exchange is housed on servers, the code has been written by somebody. Right? So, and there's a decentralized exchange that I know in Sydney that's actually closed down now. What they've done voluntarily said, we're taking it off because my name will be associated. So if the governments want to regulate Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, they will just get where you convert it into fiat.
Okay, so maybe
That's
an AI
fine.
will create the
I don't think that's a problem because in the end, that's gonna the whole thing is we're still on this idea we have to convert to fiat.
Right.
But how much longer before we're going to be going? Hey, how much do you want that? I'll take that. I'll take that burger for 5 Litecoin or whatever.
Well,
or burger. I mean, we're going to get to that point. I mean,
there's an aspect of money. There's an aspect of money that where it's a store of value, right? And we've been tracking the volatility of Bitcoin since we began back in 2014, graphing the volatility over time, and depending on what assumptions you make, we could have lower volatility in Bitcoin than the USD Euro cross by like 2022, 2023. And if that's the case, then de facto, it is at least from a measurement standpoint, a better store of value than the other major currencies in the world. And so where do you want to store your money after that time? In US dollars, in euros, or in Bitcoin? Because that low volatility means that it's going to be a store of value during that time. And, it's an interesting inflection point because it's de facto serving that purpose of money. It goes all the way back to Aristotle, which is a store of value. And do you cash out after that date, or does cashing out mean cashing out into Bitcoin or whatever the king ends up being? Oh.
Yes, the question is does Bitcoin have a long-term future, or is it just going to come to a second lifetime? Something like that, or just a gaming, like a gaming term?
I don't know. MySpace.
Yeah, I mean, all those sorts of things. I mean, is it going to go that way? I don't know. But out there as a
We don't know.
Who knows?
We're about to find out.
Who knows?
All right. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. All right. So in that vein, we've been having these incredible conversations about what will replace the existing system. We've just spent a long time kind of complaining about the status quo and a little bit about what's going to replace it. And that brings us to the scaling debate and the battle for the hearts and minds of what is the real Bitcoin. Everybody knows our friend Manu, and you probably know that he and I kind of have different philosophical thoughts on what will replace. I think it's too early to tell what is going to win. I don't think I'm smart enough to make a binary choice. Is it going to be Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin or something we don't even know about yet? But I don't know if you guys have seen this, but this is a PSA from Manu, a warning to all those using Bitcoin to basically, I won't read the whole thing, but he's saying that the original aim of Bitcoin is no longer being fulfilled. The vision of Satoshi Nakamoto has been lost, and that Bitcoin itself has been co-opted. It's no longer cheap and fast to send Bitcoin. And this is a PSA, a public service amount. I no longer advocate Bitcoin, right?
And he's the guy who pretty much converted a lot of people in this room and in this community.
Yeah, he's an old time Bitcoin person, and he's saying that the thing that we call Bitcoin now is been co-opted, and he no longer believes in Bitcoin. He's recommending a binary choice. Leave Bitcoin behind and adopt Bitcoin Cash. And there are reasons that you can kind of indict the old Bitcoin. Bitcoin is becoming very expensive to use. The fees are very high. But at some stage, all cryptocurrencies, all of them that are based on a blockchain without an infinite supply of coins, need to move from from the block reward, which is every 10 minutes there's a new supply of any cryptocurrency, to a fee-based market, right? But how do you get a fee-based market? How do you establish supply and demand? You need that bottleneck, right? There needs to be contention for space in the next block. And Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, or you name your favorite crypto, it cannot be low cost forever, right? Because the block reward goes away unless they're just going to create their cryptocurrency forever. And there are coins that say we're never going to end our inflation rate for our coin. But if your coin does have an inflation rate, or if the inflation rate asymptotes to zero, like Bitcoin does after 21 million, then that block reward needs to be replaced by a fee. And that fee only arises when you have contention for space in the next block. And by the way, that whole mechanism needs to be engineered, right? And the market for those things needs to be established. And Bitcoin itself, yeah, it's not as fast. It is more expensive, but this is a long game here. We're trying to decide what the new money is, and if it's going to be unassailable and decentralized and agnostic or unco-optable. I would say that we're in a stage, and yes, it's expensive, but we need that expense in order to drive the engineering to move us to a fee-based system, because at the end of the day, you can't have free block space forever. I mean, that is a physical constraint. There's a hard disk that these transactions need to sit on, and there's if it's free, then it will be used, abused, etc. Every other token on Earth has blocks that aren't full except for Bitcoin. So we're addressing this problem, and yeah, Bitcoin might not succeed, but I think it's a little bit early to make a binary choice between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Now, but I'm willing to be wrong on this. I'm willing to be wrong about what the ultimate choice is, and I do think that Manu makes good points. It's a good criticism of Bitcoin, but I think in the end, we don't really know. No. And if we go all in on one, it's like a single point of failure, right?
Manu also neglects to mention that Bitcoin Cash has become quite centralized. And so if you're in Bitcoin because of the idea that it's decentralized money and Bitcoin Cash is the other choice, well, staying with Bitcoin and just helping it walk across the room, this little toddler helping it walk across the room over the next decade might be the smartest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be too alternative.
Then they're not.
But there's only one that's experiencing the well, you could argue that Ethereum is also experiencing the bottleneck that blockchain technology inherently has. I mean, if you have a database that has to be replicated across the entire world, an Oracle database is going to be faster and cheaper, but it's going to be centralized. So there's a trade-off there. There are trade-offs to be made. There's priorities to choose. And
how much do end consumers actually care about centralization ultimately? And I'm putting a little percentage, but taking on board your supply and demand model, because if you look at Dash, for example, now I'm not a technical expert, so anybody who knows more about Dash absolutely comes to the party. Just when they've got the governance structure of the master nodes, that means that they can enable transactions to happen instantaneously for a fixed fee. Because if you've actually got a merchant that wants to accept to receiving Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, are they honestly going to say, yeah, well, the rate that we're going to be charged is going to vary from day to day? If they have PayPal or Visa or MasterCard say, oh, yeah, we're going to vary on a fluctuating basis, they'll tell people to get staff. So does the demand and supply model actually work?
Well, I think decentralization is an underappreciated aspect to Bitcoin, and that there's a lot of people are pointing at things like the speed of the transactions or the cost of the transactions, and prioritizing those things over the decentralization and over the immutability and security that Bitcoin provides. And I think it remains to be seen, but I think it is underappreciated from an end user standpoint. It's the ramifications of having a centralized system only rear their ugly head during the worst of times, and otherwise we tend to not care, right?
And
So,
I think there's some solutions there that haven't, like using SegWit, for transacting, and insisting that the exchanges are using SegWit. Like that seems to be working for faster transaction.
yeah, I mean, SegWit is an incremental improvement, and it enables the second layer of improvements to play out yet. But these things are happening along political lines, along religious lines almost. And like the exchanges, Coinbase and BitPay have adopted, I would say, a bit of a religious stance against the whole SegWit technology, and as a consequence, their users are paying more. And maybe the market will sort that out. But yeah, we'll see.
I mean, the other aspects that Manu argues for is the whole sidechain Lightning Network is in control of the few, and it is moving towards more centralization as well. But I haven't really seen that. I don't know enough about it, actually.
Do we know each other? Because this is like a perfect segue into my next. We don't know each other. Oh, we do know each other, so I could have arranged this in advance. Let's talk about the Lightning Network. There are a couple videos that have been circulating, and one is kind of pro Bitcoin or pro Lightning, and the other is anti Lightning. I'm going to play it, and then we can have a little bit of a discussion.
That Bitcoin is the future of our financial system, but there is a big issue standing in the way of this goal, and that is scalability. Let me give an example. The payment provider Visa processes on average around 4,000 transactions per second and can scale up to a maximum of 65,000. Bitcoin, on the other hand, can handle up to 7 transactions per second with the current block size of 1 megabyte. Not tens of thousands, but just 7. Clearly, the main blockchain isn't very scalable, but it doesn't have to be. The community has come up with a new technique called the Lightning Network to solve the scalability issues. The key idea is that small and everyday transactions don't have to be stored on the main blockchain. This avoids the 7 transactions per second limit and is also called the off-chain approach. So how does it work? Well, let's take a look at an example. Let's say that every morning, Bob buys a cup of coffee on his way to work. Creating a transaction on the blockchain for a simple coffee is really overkill. He might end up paying more fees than the actual price of his coffee. However, with the Lightning Network, Bob can set up a payment channel with the coffee shop. To do that, both the coffee shop and Bob deposit a certain amount of Bitcoin in what is called a multi-signature address. Let's assume that Bob deposits 0.05 Bitcoin and that the coffee shop deposits nothing because they don't offer refunds. This multi-signature address is basically like a safe that can only be opened when both parties agree. When we open the payment channel, we also make a balance sheet that says how the funds in the address should be distributed. So right now it says that Bob will get 0.05 Bitcoin and that the coffee shop will get 0 Bitcoin, the same as they deposited. Opening the payment channel happens on the main blockchain so that there is full transparency. The coffee shop owner can see that Bob has deposited 0.05 Bitcoin, and he can rest assured that he will get his money once the channel closes. Now that the channel is open, Bob can order his morning coffee. Let's say that a coffee costs 0.001 Bitcoin. To pay for it, Bob simply changes the balance sheet. He subtracts the cost of a coffee from his balance and adds it to the coffee shop's balance. So now it says that Bob will get 0.045 Bitcoin and that the coffee shop gets 0.005 Bitcoin. Bob and the coffee shop now sign the updated balance sheet with their private keys. They then each keep a copy of it, but they don't do anything else with it. Bob can keep ordering coffee for as long as he has a balance in the payment channel. Both of them can make hundreds of thousands of transactions between them. There's really no limit because this happens away from the main blockchain. But all good stories come to an end. The payment channel can be closed at any time by either Bob or the coffee shop. All they have to do is take the latest balance sheet, which was signed by both parties, and broadcast it to the Bitcoin network. Miners will then validate the signatures on the balance sheet and, if everything checks out, release the funds according to the balance sheet. This will create a single transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. So the Lightning Network can significantly reduce the load on the main blockchain. It only requires two transactions on the blockchain, one to open the payment channel and another one to close it. It's also very safe. The system ensures that only the latest signed balance sheet can be used to unlock the money. And because both parties have a signed copy of the balance sheet, they can release the funds at any time, even if the other one doesn't want to cooperate anymore. So, for example, Bob cannot hold the money hostage that belongs to the coffee shop, and vice versa. But it doesn't end there. You don't need to open a direct payment channel with everyone you want to send bitcoins to. You can simply use the network to pass your coins around. Here is Alice. She's a friend of Bob. They have exchanged money on the Lightning Network before, so they have an active payment channel. Now let's say that Alice wants to buy a coffee. Instead of opening a direct channel to the coffee shop, she can transfer the money to Bob, who will then transfer it to the coffee shop. So there's no need to create a payment channel with everyone. In the Lightning Network, your payment tries to find a route from person A to person B, and it tries to do this with the least amount of intermediates and the least amount of fees. This further reduces the strain on the blockchain, but it requires the intermediates to have enough money in their payment channels. So now you know what the Lightning Network is and how it works. But when will it actually go live? Well, right now there is a proof of concept implementation running on the Bitcoin testnet. We don't know yet when it will go live for everyone, but chances are it happening in 2018. So that was it for this video. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up button.
All right.
What happens if the coffee shop needs to use that money to buy coffee?
You mean if they need to pay their bills?
Yeah.
They close the channel.
Any day they want, any time. And then if Bob wants another cup of coffee, he has to start
open
the
up
whole
another
process
channel.
all over again.
Generally, the coffee shop wants to sell coffee. So they'll put,
Right, but how do they use the money that arrives at the coffee shop? Like, how does the coffee shop spend that money that they have? Do they have to close the channel to do that?
Yeah. I mean, the coffee shop thing
Well,
is kind of
and
weird.
how much does
I didn't
that
like the
cost
coffee
to
shop.
So are they gonna be opening up channels every month and then cashing themselves out every month so they can spend the money they have? But then they have to tie up that money again to keep the channel open. So this is actually the people are saying that there's going to be centralization around these channels and that we're just going to get the banks again, because it's not going to be a coffee shop and a person that opens these up. It's going to be a bank, and they're going to be a clearinghouse, and they're going to have these channels with a lot of Bitcoin tied up, and people are going to be interacting with these things. But we're going to have this world of know your customer and any money laundering, and those are going to drive fees up, and we're going to get the reproduction of the system that we already have. Yes, that's the flip side, which is anybody can open up one of these channels, and as long as they can get enough interest in their payment channel to justify opening the channel and closing the channel, they could make fees, and it doesn't have to be a bank. But will these channels be regulated? Will the regulators jump on these central locations and say, we don't want Mel to make a payment, or we don't want Olivia to succeed, or do you have to? Yeah, I don't know. But it is a layer 2 solution, and moves thousands of transactions from the blockchain to just 2 transactions, opening it up and closing it up. So you can see the difference between just making the blocks larger versus handling thousands of transactions with single Bitcoin transactions off the chain. right? This is we've been talking about the Lightning Network for the last few weeks, but we haven't really gotten any of the details. This is the fundamental difference in the scaling debate and why there is so much religious fervor around this question. How do we do it? Because people have to agree on the how to make money itself work. It requires the network effects.
You may have a hard time regulating it, Gary, because anybody across the world can do it. So if they regulate the United States, there's all of South America, and there's Canada, and
and they're using the same technology that the Tor network uses, the onion routing, which is supposed to provide a level of anonymity, which is something that Bitcoin doesn't have today. And it should be available to anyone, and there should be the ability to use channels that exist on the internet itself. So, but it remains to be seen how the implementation will play out. We've got about 15 minutes more, and I don't know if everyone's aware or not, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Naval, but we've got Naval Ravikant in the room with us, and he's a very prominent figure in the Bitcoin space, and an amazing thinker. If you want to follow on Twitter, it's @Naval. Perhaps you've seen him already, but yes, he's got no face on his Twitter profile either. That's anyway. Since we have him here, would you be okay to field a few questions? Or?
Thank you very much for watching.
Oh, sorry.
See you in the next.
Sorry. Okay. All right. I guess you guys who are watching online will have to catch us next time.
We'll tell you all.
All right. Bye, guys. All right. Okay.